Vincent Papa, a shadowy mastermind, and Marcus Vella, the NYPD detective with secrets of his own, joined forces in a plot so audacious that it would shake New York City to its core and leave the police questioning everything they thought they knew about loyalty, power, and deception. Despite his calm exterior, Vincent was constantly calculating. He spent hours observing the routines of others, noting patterns in the way the police conducted their work, and in how rival gangs operated. He understood that timing was everything. A single misstep could destroy years of careful planning. Even small details, a security guard's lunch break, the frequency of patrols in a particular neighborhood, or the location of surveillance cameras were carefully recorded in his mind. Unlike many in the criminal world, he did not rely on luck. He relied on information, strategy, and discipline. Even among his own crew, Vincent maintained control through a combination of loyalty and fear. Those who worked with him understood that failure was not tolerated, but betrayal was met with consequences that could disappear a person entirely. Yet, loyalty was not blind. It was earned through competence, careful planning, and the promise of significant reward. This combination made him untouchable in many ways. As Vincent walked the streets, he did so with the quiet confidence of a man who knew the city and its secrets intimately. Every glance, every movement, every small gesture was part of a broader calculation. He saw potential opportunities where others saw obstacles and weaknesses where others saw strength. In the criminal underworld, he was a man without equal, a strategist whose next move was always hidden, even from those closest to him. The city itself seemed to bend around him, unaware that the architect of its future chaos was already plotting his next audacious strike, one that would eventually shock the very institution tasked with keeping it safe. Vincent Papa's mind was always restless, constantly turning over ideas, calculating risks and weighing opportunities. The idea of a heist that could shake the city had been forming for months, growing from a vague thought into a fully developed plan. He had been watching the NYPD closely, noting patterns that few would notice. Over time, he realized something extraordinary. The very institution that was meant to catch criminals also became a vault for their misdeeds. Confiscated cash, jewelry, and other valuables from organized crime cases were stored in police facilities, sometimes for weeks at a time, before being processed or deposited. Security was tight in theory, but in practice, it was riddled with gaps that only a keen observer could detect. Vincent understood that pulling off such a heist required precision and patience, unlike anything he had attempted before. He began mapping every detail in his mind, mentally walking through entrances and exits, imagining security cameras and guard routines. Each observation revealed vulnerabilities, small cracks in a system designed to protect against ordinary criminals but blind to someone who understood it from the inside. He realized that the operation could only succeed if it was executed flawlessly. Even the smallest mistake could land him in a maximum security prison for life. Every step of the plan had to account for variables, shifts, patrol routes, alarm systems, and the unpredictable nature of human behavior. Vincent spent nights driving past the precincts, observing the flow of officers, the rotation of vehicles, the lights in different windows, and the comings and goings of city employees. He took meticulous notes, recording patterns with near-military precision. Each detail fed into the growing plan, building a framework that would eventually transform into the most audacious robbery the city had ever seen. Vincent's approach was methodical, not impulsive. He considered how to minimize risk while maximizing gain. He studied past heists and security failures, analyzing what had gone wrong and why. He recognized that success would depend not on brute force but on deception, timing, and insider knowledge. Every element of the heist had to be synchronized perfectly, like a complex machine where one misaligned cog could destroy the entire operation. He also began to consider the psychological aspect. Guards and officers followed routines that could be anticipated. Their confidence in the system was a weakness, a blind trust that Vincent could exploit. He knew that while many criminals relied on intimidation or violence, True mastery came from understanding people, their habits, fears, and assumptions, and them against themselves. As the plan grew in clarity, Vincent began quietly recruiting the pieces he would need. Trustworthy associates who understood secrecy, skill, and patience were essential. Each potential accomplice had to be vetted with extreme care, for one wrong choice could compromise everything. Yet Vincent remained invisible, leaving no trace of his intentions. He allowed rumors to swirl, letting others underestimate him while he built the scaffolding of a heist so audacious that even the most experienced law enforcement officers would be blindsided. In the quiet hours of the night, Vincent would sit alone, reviewing every scenario, imagining every outcome, preparing for contingencies that no one else could foresee. This was no ordinary robbery. It was a strike against the very system designed to catch men like him. And as the pieces began to fall into place, one undeniable truth became clear. If executed perfectly, this heist would not only make Vincent Papa infamous, it would prove that intellect and patience could outmatch power and authority, leaving the city itself to wonder how a man had dared to challenge the NYPD and lived to tell the tale. Vincent Papa knew that even the most meticulously planned heist could collapse without access to the right people on the inside. He needed someone who had intimate knowledge of the NYPD's inner workings. Someone who could provide him with the details that no observation from the street could reveal. It was a delicate task. Finding a corrupt officer willing to risk everything for him required patience, careful persuasion, and an understanding of human weakness. Vincent didn't look for men who were greedy or violent. He looked for men who were vulnerable, whose personal pressures could outweigh their sense of duty. Detective Marcus Vella was exactly the man Vincent had been searching for. Vella was competent and well-respected on the force, but he carried burdens that made him susceptible to manipulation. Over time, Vella became entwined in Vincent's orbit without realizing the full scope of what he was agreeing to. Vincent never rushed him. He understood that forcing someone into complicity was dangerous. Instead, he built trust methodically, making Vella feel in control while quietly guiding him toward the role he would play in the heist. Vella began sharing small pieces of information testing Vincent's intentions and competence. Each fragment of knowledge helped Vincent refine his plan, confirming that the detective could be trusted to deliver the intelligence necessary to bypass security and access restricted areas. With Marcus in place, the final details of the NYPD's operations became clear. Shift schedules, security camera locations, guard rotations, and the routines of officers handling confiscated assets were all meticulously recorded. Vincent created mental maps of corridors, stairwells, and hidden entrances, cross-referencing them with the inside information Vella provided. He understood exactly when and where the security system was most vulnerable, and he prepared to exploit every single weakness. Vincent also recognized that human error was both a risk and an opportunity. He studied the personalities of the officers, the way they responded to stress, and their habits under pressure. A single distracted guard, a routine overlooked, or a predictable reaction could create an opening for him to move undetected. Every contingency was accounted for, every scenario rehearsed mentally until he could visualize it flawlessly. Beyond logistics, Vincent ensured that the plan minimized exposure. No one in his crew would enter the precinct without a legitimate reason, and every move was designed to look innocuous from the outside. Vella's involvement was crucial because it allowed Vincent to bypass the obstacles that no amount of street observation could overcome. This partnership between criminal mastermind and compromised insider was delicate, but Vincent's strategic patience made it unbreakable for now. As the days turned into weeks, Vincent's vision of the heist solidified. He saw the operation as a chess game, each move calculated, each player carefully positioned. The combination of his meticulous planning and Vella's insider access meant that, if executed correctly, the robbery could be both daring and seamless. It was a collaboration born of necessity, built on mutual need, and shrouded in secrecy. The night of the heist arrived like a quiet storm. New York's streets were unusually calm, the hum of traffic softened by the late hour, giving Vincent Papa the cover he needed. Every step of the plan had been rehearsed countless times in his mind, every detail visualized with exact precision. His crew moved with silent coordination, dressed as maintenance workers to avoid drawing attention. Their tools and uniforms were meticulously chosen to appear ordinary, mundane, and completely believable to anyone who might glance their way. Vincent's heart did not race. His mind was focused, calculating. Timing was everything. He knew exactly when each security guard would be in place, which doors would be locked or unlocked, and which cameras could be bypassed without triggering alarms. He had accounted for every contingency, from sudden patrols to random inspections, ensuring that no variable could derail the operation. The crew followed his lead like shadows, each person understanding that hesitation could mean failure. As they approached the precinct, Vincent observed the surrounding streets for any unexpected presence. The city seemed to hold its breath, as if even the buildings themselves were aware that something unprecedented was about to happen. The first step was entry. A side door, rarely used and poorly monitored, offered the crew access. Vela's insider knowledge proved invaluable. He had disabled alarms for a brief window, knowing exactly how long the team had before sensors would react. The timing had to be perfect. A second too early or too late could alert officers and end the plan in disaster. The vault door opened smoothly, revealing stacks of cash and crates of valuables. The haul was staggering, far beyond what any of the crew had imagined. Vincent directed the movement with precision, ensuring that every item was accounted for, and no trace was left behind. The operation was executed in silence. No one spoke, no alarms sounded, and no mistakes were made. In just under 30 minutes, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash and priceless items were removed, each step choreographed to perfection. Exiting the precinct was as delicate as entering. The crew retraced their steps, avoiding surveillance and navigating the corridors with the same exacting attention to detail. Every guard remained oblivious, every camera blind to the theft. Outside, the city appeared unchanged, the night continuing as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Yet in the shadows, Vincent's crew carried the fruits of the most daring heist New York had ever seen, leaving behind only questions and rumors. As they disappeared into the streets, Vincent allowed himself a rare smile. The plan had worked flawlessly, a testament to strategy, preparation, and patience. The NYPD would soon discover the loss, but they would have no idea how it had been done, or by whom. Vincent Papa had struck at the heart of the city's authority, proving that intellect, timing, and audacity could outmatch even the most formidable system. That night, he became more than a criminal. He became a legend, a ghost who had walked through the walls of one of the most secure institutions in the city and emerged without leaving a trace. The aftermath of the heist hit the NYPD like a thunderclap. The precinct buzzed with confusion and disbelief as officers discovered the empty vault. The scale of the robbery was unprecedented. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, along with jewelry and valuables seized from organized crime cases, had vanished overnight. Panic and suspicion spread quickly through the department. Every procedure, every protocol, and every officer suddenly came under scrutiny. Yet, despite exhaustive investigation, no concrete leads pointed to any suspect. It was as if the criminals had vanished into thin air. Vincent Papa watched the chaos unfold from a distance, analyzing every report, every rumor, and every news broadcast. The city was abuzz with speculation, and the police scrambled to find explanations that would make sense. Vincent had anticipated this confusion. It was part of the plan. He had left behind subtle diversions, clues that suggested rival gangs or disgruntled employees might be responsible. These false leads drew attention away from him and his crew, creating layers of misdirection that made it nearly impossible for law enforcement to trace the crime back to its mastermind. Meanwhile, Marcus Vela played his role flawlessly. The detective maintained his routine as if nothing had changed, subtly guiding internal investigations away from anything that could implicate him. His knowledge of the department's procedures allowed him to sow doubt and redirect suspicion toward external threats. Officers questioned each other, alliances within the force strained, and the investigation became mired in contradictions. Vincent's understanding of human behavior and institutional blind spots had turned the aftermath of the heist into a second layer of the operation itself, a psychological manipulation of the very people meant to stop him. As the investigation deepened, Vincent began to exploit it further. He anticipated the methods the police would use to track stolen assets, moving parts of the fortune through shell companies, offshore accounts, and trusted intermediaries. Every move was calculated to create distance between the stolen wealth and himself. The precision and foresight that had guided the heist now extended to the aftermath, ensuring that no trail could be followed, no trace could be left. Yet even as Vincent remained untouchable, he understood the fragility of the situation. Trust within his crew had to be maintained, and no mistake could go uncorrected. Any leak, any misstep could unravel everything. Vincent monitored each member carefully, ensuring that fear and loyalty kept them aligned with the plan. Every interaction was a test, every decision weighed for potential risk. The audacity of the robbery, combined with the careful manipulation of the aftermath, cemented Vincent Papa's growing legend. He had struck at the heart of authority, exposed weaknesses in the city's most trusted institution, and vanished without leaving a trace. The NYPD scrambled to recover, but the heist had already become more than a crime. It was a statement. Vincent had demonstrated that intellect, patience, and strategy could outmatch force and protocol, leaving the city questioning not only how it had happened, but whether such a figure could ever be caught. Vincent Papa had achieved the impossible. He had stolen a fortune from the NYPD and vanished without a trace. But the aftermath of the heist was far from quiet. Every day brought new risks, new eyes watching, and new whispers of suspicion. Federal agents had joined the investigation, their focus sharp and their resources vast. The city's elite law enforcement units were digging deeper, analyzing every lead, every report, every rumor, yet finding nothing concrete. Vincent knew the hunt would never stop completely. He had to stay ahead, always anticipating, always calculating. Each member of his crew faced their own fears. The adrenaline that had carried them through the heist now gave way to paranoia. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar face on the street, every mention of the NYPD in passing conversation triggered anxiety. Vincent understood these emotions. He had anticipated them. He reinforced the importance of discipline and discretion, reminding his team that a single mistake could destroy everything. Yet even with careful guidance, tension simmered beneath the surface. Vincent also knew that mobility and secrecy were his greatest assets. Hidden stashes of the stolen assets allowed him to move parts of the fortune without leaving a trail. Money changed hands through intermediaries, each transaction carefully designed to obscure the origin of the wealth. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and trusted contacts created a web of deception so intricate that even the most persistent investigators struggled to penetrate it. Vincent's genius lay not only in planning the heist, but in orchestrating its aftermath as a continuous operation in itself. Despite the chaos around him, Vincent remained calm. He moved through the city with the same quiet confidence that had defined him for years, always observing, always calculating. He monitored law enforcement patterns, noting any unusual activity, any potential exposure. Every new report, every new investigation, became data to refine his strategies, reinforcing the safety of his network. The city itself, unaware of the intricacies unfolding, continued its rhythm, oblivious to the silent storm navigating through its streets. Yet tension was unavoidable. Even the most careful plans carry uncertainty, and Vincent had learned that human behavior was unpredictable. Small mistakes by his crew, subtle changes in law enforcement tactics, and the ever-present risk of betrayal created a constant undercurrent of danger. Every decision had to be precise, every step measured, and every contingency considered. Vincent's life had become a balance between brilliance and vigilance, a continuous dance with risk where a single misstep could undo years of careful planning. In this high-stakes environment, Vincent Papa thrived. The pressure honed his intellect, sharpened his instincts, and reinforced the reality that only the most disciplined, observant, and patient could survive. Each close call reminded him of the fragility of success, yet also of its intoxicating power. The heist had given him wealth, infamy, and influence, but it had also created a world where every shadow could hide danger, every whisper could betray him, and every moment required a mind sharper than any adversary. Vincent's legend grew, not just as a thief, but as a strategist, a man who could outthink the system itself and remain untouchable in a city obsessed with control. The cracks that had been building quietly within Vincent Papa's organization finally began to show. After months of careful planning, execution, and evasion, even the most disciplined crew members felt the strain of constant vigilance. Fear, greed, and impatience crept in, testing the loyalty Vincent had worked so hard to cultivate. One lieutenant, ambitious and reckless, saw an opportunity to seize the fortune for himself. He believed he could outmaneuver Vincent, assuming the mastermind would be too careful or too patient to notice. But Vincent had anticipated this possibility from the beginning. He had always understood that betrayal was not a question of if, but when. Every member of his crew had been evaluated not only for skill and discretion, but also for character and potential weaknesses. The lieutenant's moves, subtle at first, triggered the mechanisms Vincent had quietly set in place. Communications were monitored, movements were observed, and every interaction was designed to reveal intentions without revealing Vincent's own awareness. When the betrayal became clear, Vincent moved swiftly, using his knowledge of the crew's dynamics and psychology to neutralize the threat without alerting the rest of the team. The lieutenant's capture was precise and controlled. It was not a confrontation marked by chaos or violence, but a carefully orchestrated trap that left the would-be betrayer with no options. The crew watched, perhaps realizing for the first time the depth of Vincent's foresight, understanding that their leader's intellect was as much a weapon as any tool or strategy. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty was not optional, and betrayal carried consequences that could erase a person completely from the world Vincent controlled. With the immediate threat eliminated, Vincent turned his attention to the final phase of the operation. Disappearing from New York entirely, the city had been his playground, but now it had become too dangerous to linger. Law enforcement was still searching, informants were still whispering, and the underworld remained restless. Every step had to be calculated, every trace erased. Vincent relied on a network of trusted intermediaries and safe houses, moving the stolen fortune in increments that left no discernible trail. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and anonymous transfers transformed the stolen wealth into a web so intricate that even the most experienced investigators could not untangle it. Vincent's exit from the city was as seamless as the heist itself. He had prepared disguises, alternate routes, and contingency plans for months, ensuring that no one could anticipate his movements. As he left Brooklyn, the city behind him seemed unaware that its most daring criminal had vanished from its streets, taking with him not only the stolen fortune, but the proof that intellect, patience, and planning could outmatch the combined power of law enforcement and human greed. Even in exile, Vincent maintained control over his empire. He monitored developments from a distance, adjusting movements of assets, reinforcing the loyalty of associates, and ensuring that the NYPD's investigations remained fruitless. The legend of Vincent Papa grew with each passing day, a story whispered in fear and admiration throughout criminal circles. His disappearance became part of the myth, a final demonstration that the man who had robbed the city's most trusted institution could escape without leaving a trace, untouchable, invisible, and always 3 steps ahead of anyone who dared pursue him. In the end, Vincent's audacity and foresight had turned a single heist into a lifelong legacy. Betrayal, risk, and pursuit had tested him to the limits, yet he had emerged unscathed, proving that the greatest heists were not just about money, they were about strategy, manipulation, and the ability to see the world differently than everyone else. Vincent Papa became more than a criminal. He became a ghost, a legend, a story the city would never forget. Years passed, and the legend of Vincent Papa grew larger than life. The city of New York continued to pulse with its usual energy, oblivious to the audacity of the heist that had once shaken its foundations. Yet among law enforcement, the memory of the robbery remained a constant, gnawing reminder of a vulnerability they could not ignore. Officers and detectives often referred to the case in hushed tones, acknowledging in private that no one had ever pulled off such a meticulously executed crime against their institution. Vincent's name had become synonymous with brilliance, audacity, and invisibility, a man who had outwitted one of the most powerful police departments in the world and simply vanished. The stolen fortune, now scattered across offshore accounts and hidden through a labyrinth of intermediaries, continued to fuel Vincent's influence even in his absence. While authorities chased phantom leads and scrutinized every conceivable angle, Vincent's wealth moved like shadows, untouchable and invisible. Criminal networks whispered about him, wary of crossing a figure they had never truly seen, while young, ambitious criminals studied his methods, as if learning from a masterclass in strategy and patience. Vincent had become more than a man, he was a symbol, a reminder that intellect could triumph over authority, and that timing, patience, and foresight were as lethal as any weapon. The NYPD had tightened security and revised protocols, attempting to prevent another audacious strike. Cameras, alarms, and guard rotations were upgraded. Yet Vincent's heist remained an unreplicable benchmark, a perfect crime that would haunt institutional memory for decades. Every improvement in security was in some ways an acknowledgement of his genius, an indirect tribute to the planning, precision, and patience that had defined his operation. Detectives pored over old footage, reanalyzed evidence, and interrogated potential informants, yet the trail ended in shadows, leaving more questions than answers. Stories of Vincent Papa spread beyond law enforcement. Newspapers, crime magazines, and television programs debated the identity of the mastermind, speculated about his whereabouts, and chronicled his audacity. To the public, he became a phantom figure, a criminal hero to some and a terrifying ghost to others. Each retelling emphasized not only the heist itself, but the strategy and intellect behind it, reinforcing the notion that Vincent had done something extraordinary, not merely stealing wealth, but outsmarting an entire city. For Vincent, the legend was secondary to survival and control. He continued to monitor the world from a distance, manipulating assets and connections with the same strategic patience that had defined his life. While the city remained unaware of his movements, Vincent's foresight allowed him to remain untouchable. He had mastered the art of remaining invisible, a ghost who could operate without detection, whose presence was felt only through the consequences of his actions. Ultimately, Vincent Papa became a story about more than crime. He represented the power of intellect, patience, and careful planning. The heist, the betrayal he had survived, and his flawless escape became a blueprint for understanding strategy, human behavior, and the vulnerabilities of even the most formidable institutions. Years later, no one knew where he was or whether the stolen fortune still existed. The NYPD would continue to tighten security, rival criminals would continue to speculate, and Vincent Papa's name would remain a chilling legend, a reminder that sometimes the most audacious crime is not what you take, but how brilliantly you vanish afterward, leaving only whispers and awe in your wake.